Login accepted.
For Bill. Hi, my name is Aaron Jordan. I'm from Backup and Disaster Recovery Company. I'm actually a director of engineering there. I did IT for 20 years. I have built data center architecture, failover infrastructure. So basically, when a company gets attacked or DDoS or something, and they need to fail over their servers elsewhere, that's kind of, I designed the architecture for the elsewhere and bring it on, kind of what I do. Today, I wanted to talk about something that I'm really passionate about. I know that cybersecurity is really the focus here. That's what a lot of people talk about. But for me, it's there's two sides of this same coin of cybersecurity. The other side of that coin is backup, and eventually, when you get into bigger companies, disaster recovery. My real motto is when, not if, as you can see by the title of the slides here. At the end of the day, at some point, you will be breached. You will be hustled. Someone will get in. They'll get your data. And that's the less scary part is them getting to your data, believe it or not. The real scary part is when they kill your business in the process. Whether it's ransomware or somebody holding your data or shutting everything down, at some point, they're going to take your money from your pocket. And that's really what you want to protect is your money because that provides your lifestyle, let you get other cool toys, etc. And so I want to go ahead and focus on that side of the coin. How do you recover? And then why it's so bad. So moving over, the cost of a data breach in 2023, and I'll build more modern times, is pretty expensive. About 1 in 3 people don't even know that they've been breached or don't discover it themselves. 1 in 3 people that have been breached find out through an outside source, whether it's the actual bad actors trying to take advantage of your situation, or it's some security element like the government steps in. It says, did you know that you were in part of a breach? And that's usually pretty rare. Usually they find out about the time that you find out, about the time that you finally get around to reporting it. It's very rare for you to yourself actually discover that you've been breached. And it's usually the grizzled veterans that find out. They notice something is running weird on the network or it's not running as fast or efficiently as they like it to be. And then they discover that there's somebody piggybacking and running services. And that's when you find out that you've been hit. It costs about $470,000 on average to recover from this. Now, you're probably thinking, look, the company I work for doesn't make nearly that much money. And this is an average, right? This is everything from Pepsi Cola to your mom and pop around the corner, selling at a liquor store or something. The averages are highly skewed because of those massive corporations that do get breached. But everyone is vulnerable. 82% of breaches that happen involve data stored in the cloud, in the public or private environments too, right? So remember iCloud, the iCloud breaches, and that still continue to happen. It's always like a new iteration. They're not just looking at you; they're going after Apple. They're going for the big guys where they can get mass quantity of data. In 2024, the global average cost of a data breach has gone up to $4.88 million. So they realized it was really valuable to go ahead and do this with big companies. And so that brought up the total average breach. The average cost of breach of healthcare itself is $9.77. Healthcare is one of the favorites because that's one of the ones where they will pay the ransom to get back up and running because people's lives are at risk. And you may not know this, but there are certain laws that have been passed in Europe where if you actually accidentally hit a hospital, whether it's purposeful or not, you're liable for those deaths. So when they catch these guys, they're in trouble. It's not about money, it's about lives, right? There's a 42% of organizations detect the breach using internal security systems or teams, and their managed security services providers like the MSSPs out there, versus disclosed by benign third parties or an attacker, which has increased about 27% per year. Remember earlier I said it was a 1 in 3, and now it's about 42%, right? They've gotten better, but they're still getting hit at a pretty hard rate. Like still about 60% of people are still surprised about being. And 63% of these organizations that choose not to pay the breach that that involve law enforcement end up paying more money in the long run. So if you try to hide it, don't tell the government as soon as possible, the odds that you're paying more money will skyrocket. In fact, I think it's like 80% more. I can't remember that stat, couldn't find it, but it's significant. Like if you don't, you know, I wouldn't say rat yourself out, but if you don't like confess to the authorities to help you out, you're going to end up paying more in the long run. So part of the problem mindset is a lot of companies think that they're too small, that they're not a target. But as you saw with the previous, was it Kevin and Dylan? Nobody's too small because they know that you will give them the access they need to get to the higher level entities, which then open up for other locations. There's a lot of people that get socially engineered that are like for their personal data, like a president of a massive company, and they're not looking necessarily for their personal data. They just want leverage. And then they use their personal devices, which then they piggyback into the office, which then they use as a means to get into their work devices, which then they use as a means to get into the servers, which then they use, right? As before, I think it was Kevin that mentioned, this is why you don't give admin privileges to everyone. But I've encountered most CEOs are like, well, why can't I have access to everything? Especially in the tech space, because they're like, well, I'm the CEO of a tech company. I know what I'm doing. More often than not, they know less and less. And I'll be honest with you, the further I have climbed up the food chain where I work, the less I remember. I started off in support. I could diagnose a problem from across the room, no problem. And then as I've gotten older and done less and less of that type of stuff and more management, I can tell you the cost of ownership of an infrastructure off the top of my head, but I can't tell you how this guy got into my computer, right? Before I'd be like, oh, he got into this way. It was really simple. And more and more of these small businesses, like 43% of them, are the targets because they're just a stepping stone. And 60% of these small businesses close within 6 months. So if you work for one of these guys, there's your job. It's gone, right? You have to look for employment elsewhere. Now, there's a lot of ways that they like to come after you. One of them is phishing, admin credentials. Again, we saw Dylan talk about this. The others also talked about this briefly for a moment, but they will send you emails, spoofed emails. And, you know, with that AI one, the first meeting, I didn't know that you can just do your CSS for you. I'm still under the impression that AI can't code, but apparently if you can just create a quick CSS email, send that out, and it looks just like your vendor, right? Apple, Google. Well, I know my parents would fall for it if they still use their phones, right? But it's getting better and better. And in fact, you know, I'm trained for this type of thing. I look for this type of thing. I hold the security webinars and sessions within our company. And man, some of this stuff is really convincing. So I just don't trust anything anymore, right? But then there's also RMM tools. I don't know if you know this. You guys know what CrowdStrike is, right? I'm sure you guys know what CrowdStrike is. Who saw CrowdStrike being the weak link last year? Nobody did. In fact, we're not even sure if it was Microsoft or CrowdStrike yet. There's still a lawsuit going on. By the way, once that lawsuit is cleared, then Delta and a bunch of other plane companies, transport companies, are going to sue whoever loses that case for billions of dollars, right? They're gone. As soon as they figure out who did it, one of them is going to get sued by all these other corporations because somebody screwed up. And this was your tool to protect you against this type of stuff, right? Now, we also have exploiting unpatched software. I'm a big fan of VMware, at least I was until Broadcom came along. And now you're starting to see more and more day zero exploits to VMware to get access to the entire hypervisor, which then gives you access to all the machines that you can literally clone from their infrastructure over to yours if you're not monitoring your bandwidth. And they'll just move those out. And now they own your machines and they can take their sweet time pulling that data as they need it. Then they can use that as a stepping stone if you haven't noticed to get out. Once they get the passwords over here, they can come in over here and do it again, right? Or they can just pull the information they've got already and leak all that data. We've also got mass infections across these small, medium businesses. You know, you get like the ones targeted for certain verticals. They'll go out to tax offices. And since everything is in a rush right now, as April 15th comes up, they're clicking everything, they're opening everything, and they're getting as many of these businesses as possible and get access to all their data. So this is why, on to the point, you need a good backup solution. And I'm just going to give you two things that you should really look forward to or look for when you're doing backup. And they're kind of newer marketing buzzwords, so I want to kind of define them a little bit. Are air-gapped backups. If you don't know what air-gapped backups are, it's just basically another location, right? They've got that 3-2-1 method, the 3 backups in 2 locations, and then the 1 spare, right? With the backup in the other location, you want to have it not connected other than just the feed from one spot to another. And you usually want to use a third party for that. And this way you'll make sure that it's going through some security protocol that they're not tracking to get access to the other data. Now they're going to probably be looking for that anyway, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But the idea is you want to segregate that data from your network so that when this side inevitably gets hit, you at least have recourse over here. And there's a lot of things you can do with backup data on the other side. Recovering is just one of them. But if you have the money and you do business continuity, which is a marketing buzzword for failover, spin up, you can virtualize your infrastructure over here and then keep your business running while you take care of it over here, right? Now, the goal is, again, to physically or logically separate the data from the main network. And then you want to prevent ransomware from encrypting that offsite backup by making sure that you're capturing version. So you don't want to just pull the data over and overwrite with an rsync, a simple rsync. You want to create a change block track version backup that is independent, chain independent. And what that means is if I back up and encrypt the data in the middle of my data set, I've at least got the original and then maybe recourse afterward that I can roll back from, and it doesn't break that chain. So I can just delete that and then continue on and still have all those versions available. This is very common in the industry nowadays, but people call it different things, but it's basically a chain independent. You don't have to worry about losing a piece here or there due to corruption or malware. And then you want to ensure recovery without paying the ransom. And the way you do that is just having a clean backup copy, making sure that you don't, the bad actors don't have access. And then immutable backups. This is also really big, a marketing term in the last year or two. A lot of companies have been doing immutable for a long time, but the definition for immutability changes. So some people believe that immutability means that there is no deletion of the data, maybe a retention policy hits it, but you as an individual cannot change the data. Others believe that your change blocks are the baseline for immutability because you've always got a version that you can roll back from that can't be corrupted. But what it comes down to is you want to make sure that that backup cannot be altered, deleted, or overwritten by a third party. You might have people that are authorized to do these changes, but you want checks and balances in. Kind of like that nuclear scenario where you got 2 people with the key. You don't want 2 people, 1 person to have the key to be able to do all the work. You want to make sure that 2 people have to turn the switch simultaneously and they're in one accord to go do it. And so the key for that is immutability, putting the data in another location where a lot of people can't alter that data. And then this will protect you against ransomware, accidental deletions, malicious attacks. Believe it or not, more often than not, and we were talking about cybersecurity, but more often than not, the problem is internal. You've got, what was it, Dylan that just said that you can't train some people? Some people just want to watch the world burn. They don't realize that them just simply deleting that video over there or that image over here, that Word document affects other people because it doesn't affect them, right? You want to make sure you have copies of that set aside because they're going to eventually come back and say, I guess I did need that. My boss is mad at me. That happens very frequently. And then you want to store it in a dedicated hardware or in a cloud with strict RBAC controls or access controls to make sure that those who do have access to the data should have access to the data. It's not in the slides, but I want to double down on MFA. If you have a chance to enable MFA, always enable MFA. It's not foolproof, but it does slow them down. And really, when it comes down to it, that's the name of the game nowadays. It's not if, it's when. And the longer you can make them to have to jump through hoops, they'll either stop or see that it's a challenge, keep going, and you have a higher likelihood of catching them because it takes them longer to get to it. And again, eventually you're going to have people who are just like really, really good, right? Maybe like Kevin, where they do a bunch of low-level access, they don't alert anybody, and then they get it anyway. In that case, you still need the backup to recover from, right? You still need to be able to do something about it. Now, I wanted to make this pretty quick, so I didn't want to like spend a lot of time talking about slides. Let me give you time to get a break because some of these are back-to-back. So I'll finish up with this. Once you do have backup, you want to be able to make sure that you have a rapid recovery. You want to make sure you can minimize your downtime. And maybe that's because you just have to recover a couple files quickly. You just need a quick version, or you need to virtualize your infrastructure. A lot of you guys are about to go out into the workforce, and you're going to start working for these giant companies. And some of them have backup strategies, and some of them don't. Again, Delta, they had a backup strategy. They were up and flying. People were taking their flights the very next day after CrowdStrike, right? Meanwhile, Frontier and I think Sprint and another one didn't, and they were out for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. They lost billions of dollars in that time that they couldn't fly passengers from A to B. And guess what happened to Delta? They picked up all of those flights. They collected that revenue that Sprint or Spirit, sorry, Spirit and Frontier lost. You want to make sure that you have that business continuity so you can fail over quickly, get your systems back up and running, get things back going where they were before the incident occurred. You want to make sure you protect your revenue. I already talked about that just a second ago. You want to make sure that you have enhanced cyber resilience. So besides your cybersecurity, you want to be able to have recourse to that incident by failing back. And then you want to stay ahead of your competitors. Again, Delta stayed ahead of everyone because they were able to capture the business lost by all of their competition. I just wanted to quickly go over all of that, talk about backup, and see if you guys had any questions on this. I'm not here to promote any vendor. I think they announced the company I work for a couple times. I was hoping they wouldn't. This isn't about the company I work for. This is about what you need to do to protect yourself. Right? And there's a lot of great vendors out there. Veeam is killer. Datto's all right. I mean, I like them, but Kaseya is going to murder them. You'll understand when you're in IT. You'll get it. And then there's other people out there like Cohesity and endpoint backups like Cloudberry and Code 42 and all those others are out there. So depending on what you need, depending on your recovery time point, your recovery point objective, there's going to be a lot of options out there. Anybody have any questions for me on any of this? And it could be off topic. I don't care. But so the question is, what's a good frequency for backup? That is a really good question, but it's really difficult to answer because it depends on the environment, right? For example, an Active Directory may not get updated all the time, so you may not need to back it up as frequently. A database, you want to back it up as often as you can, right? Because the transactions are business for life. If we're talking about a file server, maybe daily is good. It depends on how active that data is, how important that data is. It really just depends on the data set. And actually, that's a good question because a lot of times people will come along and they'll say, we'll just blanket cover backup everything every hour, right? And that causes data bloat, causes data growth, and that's not necessarily wise. So you need to look at your different infrastructure points. You need to look at your different servers, see what their roles are, assess the criticality of the data, right? So not all servers are created equally, and then focus on those machines being backed up more frequently and having more restore points for those machines so you have better recourse in the event of ransomware or business outage or something like that. That's a really good question, but it really does come down to what your company policy is and how critical that data is. And then really the resources you have available as to how often you can do that backup. Because sometimes the target machines can't handle as frequent backups because they're pegged. Like a database that's constantly being written to is probably pegged. So you have to bide your time and maybe do it every 4 hours. That's all you can afford until you get a bigger server. Other questions? Nope, that's cool. I'm around. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer those. If you want to know real competitive information, if you're in the field and you're looking at a bunch of backup services, I'll tell you real, like the good ones and the ones to watch out for and the gotchas for different ones. I'm not here to promote a specific company. I'm here to promote the idea. So if you have any questions on any of that, let me know. I'm going to give you guys some time back so you can get snacks and stuff. So thanks for your time, guys.